better like that.
We have a very admirable foursome presenting this afternoon. 4 people: Ann VanDeWater McComiskey. We have Nan Hood Hastings. We have Fran Goldsmith Benson. Some of us knew her as Betty at college. And Francie Stevenson Tyler. And Betsy has put together this wonderful visual of the covers of their books, or I should say some of their books. In the upper right is Ann's about babies, and you'll be hearing more about that. In the upper left is Nan Hastings Hood, who will not be illustrating her presentation, so you might kind of glance down the impressive workshop books that she's been writing and publishing. She's going to tell you more about that. The other pile of books belongs to Fran Benson, and she was the editor, not the writer of those. And then in the lower left-hand corner, a recent publication by Francie Stevenson. So this gives you an idea of the fabulous 4 that we are going to hear from this afternoon. We're going to start with Ann VanDeWater. So take it away, Ann, and good luck.
Well, the good luck part is getting all of this on. I hope I'm doing it right, Marty. You'll tell me, right? Hello, it's going to work. Is this the way we want it? Without my mouse, I know. We don't want my mouse. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to do this. I am thrilled. And
wait.
What?
We're not seeing you. We're not seeing your PowerPoint.
Uh-oh.
Did you hit share screen?
Just a second.
I told you we are all learning so much. We're really up to speed with 30-year-olds.
Ha.
Remember everybody to mute. I don't see everybody muted here, and I hear some background noise.
I can't get back to you, kiddos. There we go. And yes, I did share the screen.
There you go.
Is that going to work?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to put
First
you
step.
guys over. Can I put you there?
One more step.
It's coming. How's that?
Excellent.
Uh-oh. Well, okay. I'm thrilled to be here in my own home and not traveling, to see some of my dearest friends, and for us to bring ourselves together like this is just wonderful. And as I have said to them, thank you so much for those of you that are putting this together. It's really special for us to have this opportunity. And the opportunity that I have is to tell you about something that is my biggest passion. So the title of this is How in the World and Why Did I End Up Writing a Textbook About Babies with Brain-Related Visual Impairment? And so I'm going to take us through a little bit of history, and I am not going to do a brain discussion today, but I am going to talk about babies' brains and our brains a little bit. First of all, I've always loved to write. I'm pretty sure I came out of the womb with a pencil and a paper. And I'm not sure Mrs. Shem thought that I should be writing all the time, but I think she was one of the biggest influences in my starting to do this. So the time at Wells was incredible for me, but prior to Wells, when I had been in Scarsdale, I went to school with a young man named Harold Krentz, who was blind. And he was incredible. So I learned a lot about Braille, and I learned a lot about people with differences, learning differences. And he was president of our senior class and president of the school our senior year. I was on his cabinet, and I was in the chairman of the service department, which made sense to me because that's what I love to do. After Wells, I went to Perkins School for the Blind, which is in Watertown, Massachusetts, in order to learn to become a teacher of people with visual impairments and blindness. And it was I love Watertown. And one of the reasons that it was such a good experience, Kathy was up there at the same time, we hobnobbed a lot actually, is I fell in love with my student teacher and married the man. And it was a very wonderful marriage. What I began to realize, and some of you may already know this, is that my mouth rarely stops moving. And so putting it into a teaching context just seemed like the smart thing to do. And I love teaching. I think we're all wonderfully made, and with a little bit of this and a little bit of that, we can all be our best selves. The students that I worked with after I left Perkins and went to California were very young children. This was when early intervention was just starting in our country. And all of the kids that I worked with had visual issues and other challenges, but I also worked with their parents very directly. So the early learning that evolved from all of the years, I figured out this morning, I have been in this field for 55 years. No, it doesn't make me feel old at all. But at any rate, I came to be focused on brain-related visual impairments, which so many people do not know are different from ocular visual impairments. And that is an issue. So there's confusion among professionals, there's confusion among teachers of the visually impaired, there's confusion with adjunct people that are working with these students. They don't really understand that it's a very different situation. So we're not going to go through this, but Gordon Dutton wrote the tree of learning, and it starts down at the bottom, how everything comes through our visual senses. Not everything, but so much comes through our visual senses. And it splits off, and they used to think that there was the occipital cortex at the back of our head. If you fell on the curb, you might hurt your vision, but now they realize there's 30 some odd places in the brain that affect your vision. And that's kind of amazing when we figure out all the things that we need to do with our eyes. So I had this idea that I could write a book. And that was kind of amazing. The biggest motivation for all of this, and it's something I want us to think about too, is brain plasticity, which is, as you all know, because you went to Wells, the ability of the brain to change its activity in response to stimuli by reorganizing its functions, structure, or connections. Now, we have it still. Am I calling me? Hello. I think that was to accentuate the idea of plasticity, because everything that we do to stimulate a child, for example, can affect the brain's plasticity. The older a human gets, the less flexible that plasticity is. So with a newborn, and the book goes from newborn up to 3, the plasticity is incredible. With us, we still have the plasticity. So for example, I have been stuck on playing Wordle and Spelling Bee and a few other games like that. Now, every day I'll play one. What's happened is that my word retrieval, it may not be evident today, but my word retrieval has improved a lot. So things like getting a massage, which I used to think was just for my pleasure and relaxation. It's also for brain development, exercising, getting stimulation going through. Anything that we do other than sitting in the chair will help our brains too. But with babies, it's incredible. I mean, it's just monumental. So there's some other issues that are really serious. One is that there's a lot of confusion about the brain and cerebral visual impairment. A big worry I have is that a lot of professionals in my specific field, but also associate fields, don't quite understand the importance of parents' role. And without the parents, we don't really have the babies. The other thing is that a lot of teachers don't understand the difference of the learning needs between a baby and an older learner, say 3 and above. So the book is written for parents and new professionals or adjunct professionals. And when I wrote it with American Printing House for the Blind, I started with American Foundation for the Blind, and I said, I want this for parents. And they said, no, we don't do that. We just do professionals. So then they had some changes, and they moved me over to American Printing House because they blah, blah, blah. They took 8 years to write this puppy. And so one of the things that I had to do was couch the information, and it's tricky information, into stuff that I felt comfortable with, and that they felt was formal enough for other professionals. So I birthed this baby here, and I'm thrilled with it. I am thrilled because people are liking it. I've already done a few conferences and have a few more going. And they said that it's selling a lot. Well, I don't get a penny, so I don't care about that. What I would love every parent that has a child who was born prematurely, or who had a brain injury, or had the cord wrapped around their neck, or fell off their bicycle at an early age. I would like every family to have a copy of this book, because it will explain to them what's going on. And then it will explain in fun detail, not professionalese, things that they could be doing about it. So in the book, there are a lot of explanations. There's an explanation about what blindness is, because many, many people think that if somebody tells you that you go to the doctor and he says, well, you're legally blind, they think, oh, lights out. Not so. There's a whole range. So there's an explanation for parents so they can understand what's happening to their own baby. Lots of suggestions, ideas, activities. Everybody loves, I do too. A lot of support, and I hope clarity. So my hope is that the book will help parents get it done from the beginning, to just understand how important a massage is. So if you all don't think you should be getting massages, think again. Up to understanding how to put things on the baby's tray so that they can actually start to use that vision. Because the biggest point of all this is that cerebral visual impairment, brain-related visual impairment, can improve. So you can have a baby who seems like they see nothing be a reader. And to me, that's stop the presses, or in my case, start the presses. But it's just really exciting. And it's the biggest thrill of my life, aside from my family and all those good things and my years at Wells and those good things. But just to put 8 years of something out and have it be helpful is wonderful. And I'm done with my 10 minutes, which I'm afraid might have been more.
Well, Anne, thank you very much. Well done. Congratulations.
Thank
Very
you.
impressive research that you've done. Now, if you could clear your screen, we will move on to
Aye.
Nan Hood Hastings. Earlier, you saw a very impressive stack of books, and they were pretty much all about mathematics, workshop mathematics, which she is going to explain to us, an interest that started at Wells. So keep going, Anne.
And I think you have to push stop share.
Just one person at a time, please.
Okay.
There you go.
There you go. All right. Well done. So, Nan Hood Hastings, you remember that big pile of books? Are you ready, Nan?
I am ready.
Take it away. Take it away.
Good afternoon. Thank you for asking me to join you. I have to admit, I'm really excited about having a chance to chat with you about my professional life and show you how Wells influenced what I did. So first, what were my scholarly endeavors? At the end of my sophomore year, I left Wells to marry Bonnie's brother, Brian. I then went on to receive a bachelor's degree from Douglas College and earned a PhD in pure mathematics from Rutgers University. I spent 30 years in the faculty at Dickinson College, a small liberal arts college in central Pennsylvania. I loved what I did. I loved being in the classroom. I loved working with my colleagues. I loved learning and doing new things. I smiled every day when I walked on campus. As a college professor, I watched otherwise smart students struggle to learn calculus. They just couldn't get it. I was not alone in experiencing this. Colleagues across the nation were grappling with similar issues. At many large universities, calculus was the weed 'em out course, where over 50% of the students failed. This was in the late 80s, early 90s, and thus began what was known as the calculus reform movement. The challenge was identifying ways to address the problem, and there were many different takes on finding a solution, including my own. But before we go on, how did Wells influence what I did? In all the math classes I took, other than the ones at Wells, the instructor was what many of us called the sage on the stage, someone who stood in front of the classroom, delivering well-prepared lectures, sort of like what I'm trying to do right now today, which is a little ironic. And if you listened, if your mind wandered, even for just a moment, which apparently all of us do every 7 minutes or so, you could lose track and be totally lost. My classes at Wells were different. We sat around a table instead of in desks in rows in front of the chalkboard. We talked about math. We shared ideas. We did problems together on the board. We commented on each other's work. We had fun. Math wasn't some disconnected thing. It was a part of us. But the sage on the stage method of teaching was how I started out, both as a grad assistant and during my first decade at Dickinson. And for me, professionally, it seemed to work. I won teaching awards. I received an endowed chair. I had wonderful relationships with my students. But as I said in the beginning, something was amiss. Some bright students were falling through the cracks. So what did I do differently? I went back to my Wells roots and tried to find ways to get students involved in the learning process, to find ways to help students to learn by thinking, doing, exploring, questioning, not just memorizing, to help them take responsibility for learning, not blaming the instructor if they don't understand something, to help them read, write, and talk mathematics, not just solving problems using an algorithmic approach, to help them develop confidence in their ability to learn new ideas and use those ideas in other contexts, not expecting the instructor to teach them everything they'll ever need to know, but developing confidence that they can learn new things on their own. and maybe most importantly, to help them enjoy learning mathematics. Something about math turns us mathematicians on. We talk excitedly about mathematical ideas. At conferences, we scribble on the napkins. Mathematicians are always asking questions, learning from their errors, willing to make guesses. The primary goal of our work was to help students share this excitement, to help them think like a mathematician by designing learner-centered materials and designing a classroom environment that was conducive to learning. To do this, we used what we called a workshop approach, which was based on the workshop physics project developed by Priscilla Laws, a physics colleague of mine at Dickinson. We also used the workshop approach, as you saw on the stack of books, in pre-calculus, discrete mathematics, statistics, and the intro to computer science courses. With the workshop approach, there are two underlying principles for the instructor. First, the workshop instructor tries not to talk about an idea until students have had a chance to think about it first. Let me say that again. The workshop instructor tries not to talk about an idea until students have had a chance to think about it first. So how might this work in a typical class? At the beginning of class, the instructor sets the scene by giving a brief, very brief introduction to what it is they are learning that day. Students then work collaboratively on activities designed to help them discover and understand the new concept or new approach. As an aside, designing and writing these guided inquiry activities is what I did. That's what's in all the books. While the students are working, the instructor wanders around the room talking mathematics with them. At the beginning of the next class, the instructor gives a mini lecture about the ideas the students explored since the last class. The lectures make sense and ideas fall into place for the students. In fact, they say, hey, can't we have more of this? Do this again. But why is that? Because the instructor is talking about something they have already thought about. Second guiding principle is closely related to the first. That is, the workshop instructor tries to listen rather than explain. When a student asks a question, the workshop instructor responds by asking the student, what are you thinking? What are you trying to do? Tell me about what's going through your mind. Tell me what you've tried. Instead of showing them how to do it, instead of picking up a pencil or picking up a chalk and going up to the board and showing them all about it, the goal is to guide them into discovering on their own the answers to their questions. And in the process, help them realize that there may be more than one right way to do something, and that the very best way may be their own way. We wanted to design materials based on how students learn, that is, learner-centered materials. To do this, we observed students closely while they worked, listened to their conversations, and asked them questions. More formally, we conducted what we called critical interviews, which involved asking students to complete some problems, then categorizing their responses and interviewing a representative group of students. In the interviews, we asked them to explain their correct answers, tried to guide them through solving problems they had been unable to do, and asked them to tackle some problems they had not seen before. We used this input to write and rewrite the workshop activities. As I come to the end of my time, I cannot help but share with you a family story about critical interviews. One morning, I was washing dishes, and my then 13-year-old daughter, Karen, who is now 52, was eating breakfast at the table behind me. And we had the following conversation. Karen, Mom, what are you going to do in school today? Me, I'm going to interview my students about sets. Now note, a set's a collection of objects. For example, it could be the set of all socks in your drawer, the set of all even integers, or the set of all of us gathered here together. Sets are one of the basic mathematical objects studied in discrete math. You can perform operations on sets just like you can manipulate numbers. The problem was that my daughter Karen heard sex, S-E-X, not sets, S-E-T-S. So our conversation continued. Karen, what do you want to do that for? Me, a little surprised she was asking since we talked a lot about what I do. I responded, I want to get a clear understanding of what they know and what they think. Karen, won't they be embarrassed? Me, oh no, not at all. I know these students really well. They are comfortable with me and will talk openly and freely. Karen, But I learned everything from my brother, who was 3 years older. Me thinking, wow, I'm so proud of these kids, of my kids talking about mathematical ideas. Amazing. I go on to say, well, we're going to be discussing really complex ideas like union and intersection and how to form sets using existential and universal quantifiers. Long pause. At which point Karen realizes that we may not be talking about the same things. And she responds, what? So anyway, I've told that story over and over again. And every time she says, oh, Mom, please don't tell that again. But anyway, let's fast forward to today. What for us was quite a novel idea is now widespread. Many programs, especially at the pre-college level, utilize collaborative learning and develop ways for students to be actively involved in the learning process. For instance, Marty's grandson will be attending the Philadelphia Science Leadership Academy, which, as on their website says, it's an inquiry-driven, remember we did the inquiry-based materials, and that's on the cover of every book, inquiry-driven, project-based high school that focuses on 21st learning. This is exactly what I've been talking about. This was a type of learning environment we are trying to foster. Marty, I am so excited for your grandson. When we get done, I know I'm probably at the end of my 10 minutes, but when we get done, I'd like to say a little bit about the Florida's Department of Education's decision that it's rejected the textbooks, which many of you may have heard about.
Well, that was great, Nan. Very impressive. And I'm glad you told that story about sets and sex. I think it was inspiring.
Thank you.
And frankly, I wish that sex education was taught more like you've been teaching in your workshops. That's a personal view. Now, next up, if you remember the other stack of books, we have Fran, Benson, once Betty Goldsmith to us. She has an impressive array of books. She'll need to unmute so we can hear her.
Okay.
She won a remarkable award for being a far-sighted intellectual in leadership in the field of working class studies. She's been an editor at Cornell University Press, and Fran, it is all yours.
Okay. So when you called and asked for a title for this talk, I said I wanted to call it My Unlikely Career in Scholarly Publishing. So I need to start by explaining why I chose the adjective unlikely. The choice emanates from the convergence of two things. One is that I am newly retired. So I've been going through old papers and such. Flipping through my high school yearbook, I found a page listing each graduate's goal in life. Mine was, get ready for this, to be a rich man's poodle. I was horrified. A few days later, Marty asked if I would talk about my career in scholarly publishing. And that made me think, how does one get from that embarrassing high school quote to 2 career awards? One that cited me for helping to shape the field of labor relations, and the other, as Marty just said, for my quote, intellectual leadership in bringing the field of working class studies into being. So let me tell you a little bit about this career. It spanned more than 50 years, all of it at Cornell University, though different places. Beginning in 1970 as an editorial assistant, I eventually transformed the publications division of Cornell's School of Industrial and Labor Relations into an internationally respected book publisher. That was fun. In 1995, I became editor-in-chief at Cornell University Press, acquiring book manuscripts in anthropology and sociology, in addition to running the ILR Press imprint. In 2002, I left Ithaca, but continued working with the press remotely for nearly 20 years before retiring at the age of 75. Not so surprising to you all. In the course of these years, I sponsored about 500 books. I loved almost every minute of it. But now I confess, thinking about it, I get tired just thinking about it. Did Wells play a part in my career? Most certainly. Working on the Wells Courier was critical. It ignited my interest in and love of the process of publishing and working with the printed word. So when it became clear that I was going to be the breadwinner for my family, that experience on the Courier influenced my decision about which jobs to apply for. Even more important, though, was the lasting effect of some of the courses I took. As an English major, I was drawn to the naturalist writers who explored the gritty lives of the downtrodden and exposed class divisions. Think about Theodore Dreiser and his book, Sister Carrie. That's just one example of the naturalists. But mostly I blame Professor Catherine Lumpkin, her sociology lectures, and our field trips, especially the one to the Auburn prison. Her courses exposed me to perspectives and ideas I had not run across as a suburban kid who went to a private boarding school and was raised, let's face it, not to work, but to marry well and assume my proper place in society. Preparing for this panel, I Googled Catherine Lumpkin. I hadn't thought about her for a long time. So I thank you for inviting me to do this. I was stunned to read on the internet the biographical sketches and to realize just how similar our trajectories were. She was from the South and I was from the Northeast, different regions. We were from different eras, but the trajectories were still remarkably similar. Clearly, she was a more profound influence on my life than I understood. I only wish I had realized that while she was still alive, so I could have talked to her about it. But getting back to the awards, I was surprised by both of them, particularly the one from the Working Class Studies Association. Until then, I had not understood the role that I played, and so I was compelled to think about it. And this is what I came to understand. As an acquisitions editor, I wasn't just having fun. I was at a major university press and I wielded a fair amount of power, making decisions about what books to publish and influencing the trajectory of people's careers. I worked in an environment of scholars. Most of my colleagues had advanced degrees, but I was never particularly impressed by Ivy League credentials. Instead, I chose work that spoke to me, work that affected my way of thinking, not on the basis of someone's resume. In this way, it turns out, I gave voice to people who came from working class backgrounds and career opportunities, because as we know, job offers and promotions in academia are often based on publication records. Eventually, these books became staples in teaching working class studies. And as the number of these courses increased, it opened up a market and a need for more of these books. I'll try to give you a taste with just a few examples. Nobody's Home, Candid Reflections of a Nursing Home Aide is a book by a man who, after caring for his mother at the end of her life, felt drawn to serve the elderly. He took a job as a nursing home aide in a for-profit facility and was shocked by the realities. In one of the first brutally honest yet beautiful depictions of the life of a frontline healthcare worker. He describes in that book what his experience was like. Susan Eisenberg, another author, one of the first female electricians hired under the 1978 executive order that required more women to be hired in federally funded construction projects. She interviewed her cohorts across the country, and that resulted in the book, We'll Call You If We Need You, which revealed the shocking realities of the women, of the conditions the women faced who worked on those job sites. Another young woman trying to get a new start after years of drug addiction interviewed and photographed career waitresses and diners across the country to create her first book, Counterculture. The book was a huge success, and I'm so proud of her. Today, she is a public scholar. She has a new book out, and the Library of Congress is bidding for her archives. There were so many books, and I'd love to mention them all, but obviously I can't. Over the years, I've published my fair share of very scholarly, jargon-laden books, but I also had a reputation for publishing books that made the work of scholars accessible beyond the academic community, the sort of thing Anne was talking about. Let me see if I can catch some of the diversity with a selection of just a few of the books that I published in my last, I guess my last year at the press. All Societies Die, a wonderfully quirky book that lays out a new way of looking at societal decline and what we might do about it. Rich Thanks to Racism, a book about how the ultra wealthy have profited from racial injustice. A book on what bold labor reform would look like. An expose of labor standards in the global supply chain, the changing role of men in Japan. There was a book called Shredding Paper about the rise and fall of the paper industry in Maine. The book titled Commuter Spouses was about changing family structures as people are working in different places and what that means for marriages. A Precarious Game suggested that the dream jobs people think of in video gaming, in the video gaming industry, are an illusion. Then there was a bunch of books that we did on healthcare. I had a whole series because healthcare is now, basically the largest industry in this country. The books I published long ago were all about the auto industry and manufacturing, and now they're about education and healthcare. If I had time, which I think I don't, I would go on at length about one of the recent books called The Man in the Dog Park, which is about one woman's experience of coming up close to homelessness. This is one of the books I've sponsored that I think everyone should read. One of my favorite stories related to it, it's a book that has been read in a number of book groups. And when I was talking to the author the other day, she told me that one of the groups got in touch with her to say they were so affected by the book, they really wanted to do something, not just talk about it over glasses of wine. And so she set up a GoFundMe page and let the local shelter know. And now book groups who read this book can go to the GoFundMe page. And when the local shelter that needs something, they just call the author and she arranges to get it for them. And that's something I'm pretty proud of. And then I guess the last thing I would say is, this is always fun to talk about. One of the first books I published was by Barbara Kingsolver. I assume most of you know who she is. Before she was a household name, she wrote a book about the surprising role that women played in the copper mine strike. in Arizona. And we published that book. Now, she would have been famous without us, but that was, just one of the wonderful things that has happened.
Wow, Fran. Very impressive also. You have lots and lots to be proud of, and I'm going to give you an assignment. I'd like you to list the authors and titles that you just talked about so that I can share this with our classmates, because I can tell from looking at people's faces that they'd like to know more. And we also have websites for Francie's book coming up, and Anne. So there will be more information coming as a follow-up. So congratulations. I love the idea that you've changed people's lives.
Thank you.
So next up, we have Francie Stevenson Tyler. Not necessarily last and not least. We designed this because of the audiences. Anne was talking about babies. Nan was talking about school children learning math. Fran obviously reaching to adult audiences, as is Fran with her new book. Now, Fran, first thing you need to do is to unmute, get rid of your mute, right?
Yep, unmute.
And I might mention that for years, Francie was an editor also at the National Portrait Gallery. And while she's getting ready with her PowerPoint, go ahead, I'll keep talking a little bit. I can remember being at the National Portrait Gallery and doing research and happening to knock on this very distinguished door in a beautiful building, the old Patton building. And there was my classmate from Wells. Very impressive. So Francie, can you get your PowerPoint up and running? Share screen, right?
Yeah, okay, share screen. Wait a sec. Phew.
You can do it.
I hope so. I hope so. Here we go. Share screen. Wait a sec. That was a mistake. Okay, share screen. And then we go away from this thing that is really giving me a problem. And
I will mention while you're working on this, Fran, that everyone is in for a visual treat. As someone who sees a lot of art on a regular basis, works with art, I was very impressed. We're lucky that we just get to look. We don't have to worry about remembering names or dates. It's all about the visual beauty.
Here we go, I think.
Very good.
I'm sorry, this is not, I am screen sharing, but I'm not screen sharing what I want to share. So this is a problem. Just a moment here. Francis Tyler, recent, new. This
Did you have your PowerPoint open, Francie, before you started?
I did.
Yeah, so you ought to be able to just double click on it if you see it. Do you
Yes.
see it?
I have opened it and it's, let's see. Everything is just kind of stuck. This is so frustrating. So wait a moment. Let me close that. I guess I could close that. Whew. I don't know what to do. Wait a moment. On my Mac.
The other thing you could do is email the PowerPoint presentation to one of us, and we could show the slides. You just tell us when to forward.
This is so stupid. I'm really sorry. This thing is just not, I can't close anything, so I can't, let me stop share. All right. And let me stop this, and it's not letting me close. This is not working. let's see if it is asking me to sign in with Microsoft, which makes no sense at all. I don't think, anyway.
No.
Let's see. New. No, recent. Yes. Book presentation. Open. There we go. Now, are you seeing it?
So you need to share screen again.
All right. Okay, just a moment. I am really sorry about this. It's just so confusing. Here we are. So what do I do with it? I want to share it. Share. So I am screen sharing, and does anybody have it yet?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, well, isn't that exciting? Okay, slide.
Slideshow.
Play from start. There we are. Can you see that?
Bravo.
Oh, I'm so
Yes.
glad. Oh, I'm so glad. Okay.
Proceed.
Oh, this is really exciting, actually. And I thank you so much for your patience. And let me go into my talk and just say right at the start, what a fascinating bunch of presentations. I want to get back to, my slideshow. All right. Well, wait a moment. Sorry again. This is not starting. Yes, it is. All right. It didn't start quite at the beginning, but that's all right. I want to congratulate everybody for the fascinating bunch of presentations. It's incredible. It seems that we have each greatly bloomed after graduating in ways that nobody could have predicted in many cases. And also much thanks to all of you who organized us, and to you, Eileen, in particular, for the wonderful, inspired, and fun idea. The title of my book is Despite Ceausescu, a collection of Romanian art. I wrote and published it last year, and this slideshow is giving you a sampling of the collection. I hasten to say that these slides, which I have cropped and sized to fit the screen, do not do justice to either the original art or to my superb photographer. They are just meant to give you an impression. Instead, you need to buy the book, and I've given a copy to the Wells Library. I'll guarantee that you have never seen this art before, because it is unknown outside of Romania. You've never heard of the artists either. Bernet, Culcia, Gerasim, Gorduz, Guguianu, Ilfovanu, Naparush, Niculiu, Pacha, Petrescu, Radu, Sharu, and finally, an anonymous Transylvanian painter of Romania's typical icons on glass. Somewhat astonishingly, this work was created during one of the darkest periods of Romania's history, the 1970s and 1980s, during the brutal, repressive communist dictatorship of Nicolae Ceausescu. He and his wife were finally assassinated by the citizens on Christmas Day, 1989, around the period of Glasnost. My first husband, James, was the Romania desk officer at the International Monetary Fund here in Washington. And in 1978, I was allowed to accompany James on a mission there, even though we were official guests of the Romanian Ministry of Finance, and thus shielded from much of the misery in chauffeur-driven cars and accompanied everywhere. We still could not help but see the downtrodden people queuing up for often non-existent food, crammed into tiny apartments, always having to assume that they were being spied upon, even by friends and family. Very demoralizing, very dehumanizing. Our hotel rooms were bugged, and IMF staff had to conduct their business on sidewalks. The citizens were also sealed off from the outside world. They could not leave the country without authorization from the secret police. This was all sort of a horrible variation on our COVID lockdown, except that this went on for 2 decades. James's boss was Geoffrey Tyler, an Australian economist who liked art. And from these missions, James started to bring home some interesting paintings by an artist named Corneliu Petrescu. Over the next several decades, I pursued my career at the National Portrait Gallery, heading the publications department. Meanwhile, although we had lost touch, Geoffrey was acquiring a lot of Romanian art on every mission to eventually form a 900 work collection. Each time, he must have purchased a few more suitcases in Bucharest and crammed them full of his treasures, with the customs people looking the other way as he left. He and Petrescu had formed a deep and enduring friendship, which would last the rest of their lives. And Petrescu had led him to many of the most important artists of that time. Fast forward to 2008. Through a sequence of stranger than fiction events, featuring Petrescu and probably a squirrel, Geoffrey and I reconnected. Not only that, we truly fell in love and were married in 2009. Over the next 3 years until Geoffrey's final illness, we got very busy, arranging to donate his collection to his alma mater, the University of Tasmania, and to awaken the interest of a remote Australian islands university in a lot of art from an Eastern European country just south of Ukraine and best known for Dracula. We gave them an endowment. Plus, they inherited me with my Smithsonian background, eager to travel to their capital, Hobart, often and offer advice. Happily, their curator, Rachel Rose, was very much drawn to this project. She's become a dear friend. Early on, she set up a richly informative website, Google Tyler Collection, and you'll find it, into which she has cataloged every work. Over the years, she has also developed connections with scholars around the world and arranged trips for the two of us, mainly to Romania, to interview the artists or their families, all to enrich our understanding. COVID, of course, brought our travels to a halt. At home, I looked around with new eyes. About 90 of my favorite works still surround me here in my house in Georgetown, which I had bought for its gracious display spaces. Of course, with my 3 decades of art book publishing, I must do a book. And it had to be beautiful and perfect and spare no expense. I found a first-class graphic designer from the National Gallery of Art, which was key to the book's success. And Geoffrey's reminiscences in his frequent letters to Petrescu provided wonderful text. Photographing the art was a giant undertaking for which the National Gallery's chief photographer overhauled my library to set up his state-of-the-art equipment. To represent each work just as the artist had conceived it, which was our goal, most of the paintings and collages had to be unframed. An art handler was needed, and I had to organize their parking, take out insurance, and exactly measure each work's dimensions in inches and centimeters, and record any discoveries, inscriptions, often in Romanian, hidden behind the frames. This upheaval went on for a long 3 weeks. I press inspected the book last October, which at the Portrait Gallery had always been my favorite thing. And it was a thrill to see this come into being at Meridian Printing in Providence, reputedly the finest art book printer in the country. So now the books are in cartons stacked in my garage. Happily, the publisher D. Giles in the UK will take on their distribution in September. And with them, we are also planning a digital version. I have been sending out copies to numerous people, starting with the artists themselves who had given me permission to illustrate their work. And here is something that those of you who are published authors will know. It's an experience to put something out in the world, namely your book, and see what comes back. Heady and touching reviews, surprises that people will focus on. And alas for me, one misattributed painting. That was Jeffrey's fault. He was making a guess, and it was a wrong one. Here's another thing about a book, though. Although it looks and feels enduring and solid, it captures just one moment in time from one person's point of view. Despite Ceausescu doesn't convey that period's suffering because I didn't see it. Much, and likely never enough, has been written about that by others. Really, I believe that my work has only just begun. My book is intended as a pump primer for serious scholarly study. To this end, I have started funding postdoctoral fellowships through the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. There is everything to discover in this virgin territory, starting with the individual artists, a reckoning of their place in the international community. I would love to sponsor a study of the cross-fertilizations between the artists who were cut off from the outside world and turned to each other for inspiration. Their own critics, I have been lucky to find some of their reviews in English, and this is and that was fascinating because they have a different critical approach. This has all become my life purpose, my way of carrying forward Jeffrey's legacy. There are some challenges. One is that Romanian is a difficult language. Another is that Romania has been only very slowly recovering from communism. Importantly, though, and just recently, the Securitate, the secret police, files from that period have been opened for researchers. Our current project is a biography of Corneliu Petrescu. And suddenly, this has perhaps is getting personal. From the Securitate, our biographer has turned up that Petrescu was an informer, and sometimes indeed a collaborator, reporting on my husband, among others. The Romanians could have assigned Petrescu to influence Jeffrey favorably toward them in his IMF negotiations. True that we can imagine that all citizens had to lead double lives in order to survive in those times. But Petrescu, who died in 2009, could well be revealed as a much more complex person, as perhaps could my late husband. I will leave you with this, and I invite your thoughts. Thank you. Stop share. How do I do that? Stop share.
Well done, well done. Another wonderful story, a true labor of love. Very impressive. We have a few comments in the chats, and then we will open it all to general conversation. We're running a little after 5, so we understand if people have obligations and must move on. But I'd like to read a few comments. Kathy McCullough writes to everyone about Anne and how she sat with Anne as she worked with a grandmother of visually impaired grandchild, with the mom being on the phone. I was most impressed with how incredibly well she connected with everyone and gave them wonderful advice, and above all, hope for their little one.
Mm.
Sally Allen, I think this Sally is about one of Nan's books. She says, I bought the book and now know to share it with my granddaughter, who is a new mom. No, this is one of Anne's books, who is a new mom to a premature baby boy, just 6 weeks old. And now Mary Philstrip Wilson is talking about Nan Hood's math books. I'm so impressed with this idea of learning mathematics as a collaborative inquiry experience. That is mind-opening for me. Ann McComiskey says, such wonderful paintings, Francie's. And Nancy Catherwood Magnuson agrees, and Nancy is an artist herself, and you will be hearing and seeing her work coming in May. Those images are fantastic. I must get that book. I'm sure Francie's glad to hear that. And Mary Wilson, also an artist, especially agrees and likes the reds. Before we sign off, I have one request. There is a mystery among us, and I hope this person hasn't signed off. Where is Brandon? Is Brandon gone? Who is Brandon?
Oh, I can answer that. She's a friend of mine, and she was not sure that she could come. She's a guest.
Okay, good, good. I bet some of the others of us were worried about that. And
I thought it
Karen
was
Frankel says-
Waldo.
She's an old friend of yours,
right.
Mark, I think.
Thanks so much. Karen Frankel says, fantastic program. She has to leave. And I want to remind or invite everybody to come back and join us on May 11th. We will be revisiting the idea of social issues. Nancy Catherwood Magnuson will be one of our presenters. Lynn Lederer will talk about her experiences with the Peace Corps. And Nancy Atwater Janis will be also one of our presenters. So again, May 11th, you'll be hearing from me. I also plan to send out some bibliography relating to this particular afternoon. Now, we can turn off our mute, continue to converse if we wish. As I said, those of us who must leave can sign up. So, any comments?
I have a question for Anne. Anne, when toward the end of my father's life, he invented a lot of stuff, and he was working on something. He tried to explain it to me, and I didn't understand it at all. But later, I don't know, in recent years, I read something in the newspaper that apparently some progress has actually been made on this idea. It was about some way of allowing blind people to see. I don't know what I don't know what it was. No, is that Wifty or?
No, it's just very specific to certain kind of diagnoses in certain situations. There is some brain work being done to make some connections, and it's another kind of vision. It wouldn't be like ours. It would be more like digital vision, sort of. It's not something that's commonly used among people that adults I know that are blind, nor do I see. Now, I've been retired for 13 years. Let's take that into consider. I think it's 8 years. I can't remember, because that's why I'm working on the brain. But
probably within the last 8 years that I heard that something along these lines had actually been effected.
I think it's working. It's a work in progress, I think, but I don't know. It does exist.
Thank you. I thought he was nuts, but he's my father.
I
What did
have
he
nothing
know,
to say about that, Karen.
Well, he was a little nuts, but yeah.
Thank God, aren't we all?
Yes.
Okay.
He also invented freeze-dried coffee before in the 40s, and his boss said, no, we're not interested in that. That'll never go over.
Oh, too bad.
Yeah, I could have been a millionaire.
I got a comment.
I think Kathy McCullough has a comment, and then we'll do Wolfie.
I was just going to say, I've missed the very first one, but I've been present for all the others. And I think the thing that I am most impressed with is how Wells so well prepared all of us to kind of take what was in front of us and find other connections with other things, that Nan was talking about, that inquiry. But I think we all learned how to go deeper than just the surface in whatever we're doing, and then find the connections. And that to me is a incredible testament to the kind of education that we got and what we want all of our children, grandchildren, and so on to get.
I would jump to say, Kathy McCullough, there isn't a poodle among us.
Okay, Wolfie, and
Yeah,
then
I just want to
Kathy
say
Sawyer.
how impressed I was with Betty / Fran's job in publishing and the array of books they sent.
Yeah.
So many of them sound very interesting.
Yeah.
I was very impressed.
Thank you.
Wow.
I can't wait to see that list.
Good. Okay, Kathy Sawyer, you had your hand up?
No, I think Carol Mulwiney did. I didn't have my hand up.
Oh,
Okay, Carol Mulwiney.
I'd just be interested in what Nan had to say. She said she had some strong things to say, maybe about the Florida situation in mathematics.
Oh, right.
Well, just to say, just briefly, some of you may have seen this in the paper. It's certainly been in the Washington Post. And we also have a place in Florida so we share time between here in Maryland and Florida. But recently, the Florida Department of Education rejected 41% of the textbooks were submitted to be used in the K through 12 level. And so I read about what the reasons were for why they rejected these. And part of it was because of the Common Core. And as they wrote, they wanted to, I have it written down here, they wanted to place an elevated focus on memorizing math facts so students aren't penalized for using the strategy that works best for them, which is just the opposite of what I was trying to do.
Right.
Was to not have them memorize, to have them understand and to be able to utilize their ideas. Another thing what they got rejected for was they wanted to increase the mastery by focusing on foundational computational skills. Otherwise, to have the kids memorize, this is a series of steps that you use, this is how you solve the problem, which I have to admit, we found absolutely doesn't work. So guess what? If they had submitted any of my texts or the workshop texts to Florida, they would all
Wow.
No, they'd be
Wow.
out. Yeah.
out. And the other one they had was that another thing is this what they call social and emotional learning. They didn't want any of the students to have anything that had to do with social and emotional learning, which could also occur if you're working collaboratively on a problem, or if one student is trying to help another student solve a problem. Quite honestly, I feel this is very, very sad. But that's where we are today.
Catherine Wood, you had a comment?
Yeah, I actually, Francie, I really am serious. I would love to get a copy of your book. Do I truly have to wait until September?
No, you don't. The last slide, let me see. There was the last slide in my presentation, and I also sent it to you, Marty.
Okay.
But Politics and Prose Bookstore has an online thing, and you can order it online. So
Oh,
that's the best
great.
way to get it right now, from Politics and Prose. And the website is all lowercase www.
Yeah.
politics-prose.com.
Okay.
Well,
Thank
will
you.
that,
That
will
was
that
the
be
best.
will that
That
be in
was-
the information that we get? Because I think there are a lot of us that want that book in our library.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful.
Francie, that was the best, one of the best museum gallery shows I've seen in some time.
Well,
Thank
thank
you.
I
Thank
really
you.
cropped and sized the pictures, so, they will look, the actual works of art are
But
maybe a little more.
yeah, you curated the collection over many years and it's fantastic.
Wow, thank you, thank you. Well, it's been fun. Very fun.
What an
Working
awesome group. Wow.
the remaining embassy folks too have been very interesting to work with. So made a lot of new friends.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other comments? All right, this has been another very stimulating program, and I think
Yeah.
we're all to congratulate
Great.
everybody. And
Don't leave. Everybody go get a glass of wine and let's chat.